Hello all. Today we are going to discuss the strategy to master UPSC history. So let's get started. So history is that subject which is easy to read but difficult to remember and much more difficult to rewrite it in the examination. So first of all we'll see what exactly is the syllabus. So this is the official syllabus for the mains, and you would have noticed that there is a difference between the syllabus which is given for the prelims as well as mains. For example, in the case of prelims, there is no post-independence history which is mentioned. In the same way, the world history is mentioned only for the mains but not for the prelims. So many students are of the opinion that there is a separate portion or the syllabus for prelims and a separate syllabus for the mains. But my suggestion is both the syllabus, the prelims and mains, go hand in hand, and do not prepare twice for the prelims and mains, because you can see a lot of overlap of the subject syllabus questions in both prelims and mains as well as a personality test. So once you are preparing a topic, try to prepare that particular topic from the prelims point of view, mains point of view, as well as the personality test point of view. So this way you will save a lot of time which otherwise spent on the multiple readings of the same topic. This is something which we need to avoid. Now, broadly, the syllabus says it is about the Indian art and culture, that is ancient and medieval history, otherwise called. Then the next subsection of the syllabus is the modern Indian history. Then we have post-independent history, and also we do have the world history. So these are broadly the subjects you have to prepare. In other ways, these are the topics of the history portion. Now, this GS1 we can broadly divide into geography, history, and society. Now, UPSC has made a lot of changes from 2013 paper. So, where the subjects like society were introduced, the history and geography were restructured. Now, GS1 consists for 250 marks. So, the of these 250 marks, we can say roughly one third of the paper is from history. That is what we were discussing now. So history, one third, like about 70 to 80 marks every year are being asked from history. And of this, again, the world history, we will see the weightage of the marks. And now there is Indian history. Again, Indian history broadly for the sake of our understanding, we can divide into ancient and medieval. This is nothing but art and culture. Now, this is where I would like to focus and reiterate that there is no there is no such topic like art and culture. It is nothing but ancient and medieval history. Just because the topic has been mentioned separately in your main syllabus, many students thought that it is a separate topic which is given and it is like a separate. Some students started preparing as a separate subject, but this is something, a flaw which you need to avoid. And the best way to master the art and culture is to prepare along with ancient and medieval history. Now again, there is a lot of overlap between the ancient, medieval, and modern, and most of the times the type of questions which are going to be asked in the mains examination as well as prelims examination, they are highly interdisciplinary in its nature, which we will see the type of questions which are being asked. Then we do have the modern Indian history, or that is what we call it as freedom struggle. Now, the freedom struggle and modern Indian history, again, there is a lot of overlap. Some students try to distinguish modern Indian history is from maybe 1707 or 1757 to 1857, and freedom struggle starts from 1857 to 1947. Again, I suggest do not make a strict compartmentalization of these timelines, because as I told, there is a lot of overlap, because the way you have to prepare, you have to be in a position to connect the past with the present. And the same thing goes with your post-independent history. Many of the events which happen in the post independence are basically an extension of the freedom struggle, whatever we have fought. So, whatever the events which are happening in 1960s, 70s, or 80s would be having a lot of impact which are drawn from your freedom struggle movement. So, the same thing is repeated in the case of post-independent history. Many of the issues, many of the challenges post-independent India has to focus are something which were fought already in the freedom struggle. For example, the constitution calls for a socialist government. The constitution calls for a democratic government. Again, the constitution calls for liberty, equality, fraternity. Now, all these are the things, key features which our freedom fighters have fought for, which till today we can see many of the challenges in achieving their end goals. That is why if you are trying to correlate your present events, so try to understand from your past. Now, this is one way, the key which you can, the way you can prepare for your exam, and the same thing goes for your world history as well. Now, world history is nothing but, you can say, the precursor of your international relations. Now, world history stops at 1990s and your international relations start at 1990s. Just like your modern Indian history stops at 1947 and post-independent history or nothing but polity or economy starts from 1947 as well. Now, in the same way, you have to prepare whenever you are preparing a current event. Try to find out the past. Whenever you are reading a event in the past, try to correlate it with your current event. Now, this way you will be able to cover both your current affairs as well as your history. Now, uh, uh, looking at the number of questions which are being asked in prelims, now let us have a look the weightage of the marks in your history from your history. So the trend, again, whatever we are discussing is just the trend, as we know that UPSC U stands for unpredictability. So on an average, we can say that about 17 questions are being asked from your history paper. Now earlier, that is maybe before 2013, we can see that the weightage of the questions was something like one fourth of the paper, because the major course areas of your general studies preparation are history, geography, uh, polity and economics. Now over time what happened is new and new topics came up and which are being added by UPSC. Something like environment came into your syllabus, the science and technology came. So because of these new topics, so the weightage for the stagnant topics or the static topics such as history and geography was declining. And when we say declining, again, it is not that we can ignore it, still we can pass the prelims. As we know that prelims has become very highly competitive. Now, even a single question you cannot afford to miss. Now, at this stage, it becomes even more important because topics like modern Indian history are like low-hanging fruits, where with little amount of effort, you can be able to convert almost all the questions with a relatively relative ease compared to the top other topics such as maybe something like environment or biodiversity or science and technology, where the topics are much broader and the depth of questions are also very demanding. So this is where we can actually leverage much upon your history preparation. Now from prelims on an average you can consider like 17 questions are being asked out of 100 questions, and from your means this is the weightage. As I told again, the trend says one third of the paper, that is about 70 to 80 marks on an average are being asked. Again, the further breakup you can see it here in ancient and medieval, modern, that is freedom struggle and world history, and post independent history we can see declining weightage and almost nil questions are being asked in the recent past, whereas majority of the questions, maybe 6 or 7 questions out of this, majority of the questions, maybe half of the questions are from your modern Indian history, that is freedom struggle. So I suggest if you are focusing on the topics, like again try to have a look at the previous question papers. Now we can see that the questions which are being asked are a bit uh, convoluted, or they are called non-conventional questions. Now, why I am calling these questions as non-conventional questions? Because it is not from your academic studies you will be able to answer these questions. Now, this is where the UPSC questions they become very demanding or challenging or tough the way you look at it. Now, to exactly understand what I mean by non-conventional questions, let us have a look at the previous questions. So again, I have taken majority of the questions from your history optional paper as well, but the questions which can be asked in your mains might be relatively easier. Now, coming to the type of questions which can be asked in the examination, mains examination, I call it as non-conventional questions, where majority of the students find it very demanding, or with their preparation they are not able to do that, because majority of the students are, as I told, they have stopped reading history after their schooling. So the way they might read hardly one or two textbook at the max for the topics like ancient and medieval, and it become almost impossible for them to cover all the topics, remember them, rewrite them in the examination. And further added to that, the type of questions, as I told, they are non-conventional questions. When I say non-conventional questions, you cannot see the answers to these questions in any of the standard textbooks. That means you have to generate the answers then and there and try to create the points, and you have to answer accordingly. As I told, this is what I call it as non-conventional questions. Now let us have a discussion on the type of non-conventional questions. For the sake of your understanding, I divided all the questions into four categories. We can see it here. The first category, I call it as the comparison based questions. Okay, so which you can see it here, the comparison based. Comparison, that means they try to relate one topic with other topic and try to uh, ask you to compare and contrast. For example, there was a question in your mains. If you have looked up your previous question papers, you will see these questions in your optional as well as your general studies history, like compare and contrast Nalanda and Takshila. Now, many of us know that Nalanda and Takshila is one of the ancient learning centers of India. Now, how they are correlated? See, first of all, knowing that there is Takshila, there is Nalanda, that itself is a great deal for many students. Now, if a question is asked something like Takshila and Nalanda, compare and contrast, now it becomes relatively much difficult for the students. Now, I can ask you a question. Maybe you'd have heard of the Nalanda and Takshila. So, if you know where exactly is Takshila today, you can put it in your comments. So let me check again, along with the province or the state as well. Okay. Now, the second type of questions, like the Nalanda Takshila type question, or compare and contrast Indus Valley civilization with other civilization. I hope you all know that Indus Valley civilization is a riverian civilization. Along with Indus Valley, there are other civilizations which have flourished, like the Chinese civilization along the Huanghe, or the Egyptian civilization along the river Nile, or Mesopotamian civilization along the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. Now, the question was how Indus Valley civilization has maintained the continuity, or whether was there any disconnect with that of today. Whereas in the case of other civilizations, there was a complete disconnect. In what ways Indus Valley civilization is different from that of other civilizations? Again, these are something like a bouncer type of questions for many students. So where they have to generate the points then and there. And we can also see the questions something like compare and contrast German unification with Italian unification. Okay, we all know that German unification and Italian unification went hand in hand, happening in the 19th century, the later half of the 19th century, 1870s around, with the help of Count Cavour and Bismarck, uh, for Italian and German unification respectively. But the way they have unified, there is something different which is going to have a lot of impact on the further events to come. Now, how to compare and contrast? So this is something which no textbook talks about. Okay. Now, these are some questions which can be asked from history itself. Now, there are some areas where they are drawn from one topic and they try to contrast with some other topic. For example, see this question, compare and contrast Italian Renaissance with Bengal Renaissance. So here they have tried to compare world history, a topic from world history, to a topic in modern Indian history. Now this is much more difficult for the students because, as I told, no standard textbook or no standard historian would try to draw the parallels. Maybe at the max they might mention one or two lines that there is Bengal Renaissance which happened in India and which is something different from that of Italian Renaissance. But writing 200 words just based on these points become very tough for majority of the students. And uh, uh, okay, coming to the next question, like maybe many of you know that Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he played a very important role in the unification of India or the integration of princely states into the modern India. So he is often called as the Bismarck of modern India. The way Bismarck played an important role in the formation of Germany in 1870s, in the same way played an important role in the formation of what we call today as India, where he integrated more than 500 princely states into the Indian into the fold of the India. Now, this role played by Patel has been acknowledged by many authors, historians. But again, compare and contrast. Writing 200 words on how Patel and Bismarck are same or different. Again, a challenging task. Or Samudragupta is often called as Napoleon of India. Again, compare and contrast the policy of Samudragupta versus policy of Napoleon. Or Aurangzeb versus Napoleon. Now, here you have to notice that one question is from ancient India, one question is from world history. Again, they try to correlate. In the same way, world history versus medieval Indian history. Now, this is where students are very much confused, or they find it very challenging writing the answers, that too 200 words, valid words, and that too you have to think then and there and write this. So, this is where you should have a holistic preparation instead of compartmentalized preparation. So, whenever you are preparing the topic, as I told in the beginning, you have to correlate one topic with other topic. So, again, similar way, Nazism versus fascism. Again, much easier because both are from your modern world history. The Nazism of Hitler and fascism of Mussolini, how they are same, how they are different. Or now this is where further more difficult because compare and contrast Indus Valley civilization with smart cities. Now this is where students are completely clean bowled. Okay, the reason is they have asked one question from ancient Indian history and one question from your polity. So as I told, now even if for a student who has studied a lot about Indus Valley civilization, or there could be students who have studied who can write a complete essay only on smart cities. Now both of them are on the same platform. For both of them, answering this type of question is next to impossible without brainstorming then and there. Now, one good news is even if you do not prepare much in your history, when I say prepare much, that means even if you do not have that academic understanding of history, that is fair enough. That is why this topic is called as general studies. That means even if you are a PhD in history or you are just out of college, studied history only in your schooling, that does not matter because both of you are on the common ground. That means even a lot of history knowledge does not help you out in answering this type of questions, which is good news for some, bad news for something else. But this is the way UPSC questions are designed. This is what UPSC calls it as level playing field. And further later, there are much more difficult type of questions like compare and contrast Buddhism not with Jainism, Buddhism with Indian Constitution. Okay, now what principles of Indian constitutions are derived from Buddhism? Now this is where it becomes further more difficult for students. Okay, this is the first type of questions, what we call it as comparison based questions. The second type of questions are called as analysis based questions. Analysis based means why. Okay, now many students accept that this as something written as a written on stone and they take it on the face value. Many students do not ask why. Now this is where UPSC is going to stress more, like why it has happened like that, why it could have been different. Now why this particular many students, many history students know that there are three battles which are fought at Panipat. Okay, all the three are empire shaking battles. But the question which was asked is why Panipat chosen as a battleground? Now here only your history knowledge might not be able to help you out. Here you need the knowledge of geography, society, something about the contemporary economy as well. Then only you'll be able to answer this type of question. Or why India got independence on 15th August, or why we became republic on 26th January. Okay, try to get I hope some of you might know. Okay, if you know, you can put it in the comments. Otherwise, maybe in the coming classes, I'm going to give the answers. Or why Renaissance has started in Italy, or why Bengal Renaissance started in Bengal, why not in Madras, which province, why Bengal became the hub for the intellectual movement in various streams, or why Industrial Revolution started in Britain. Okay, so these are some kind of why type of questions. Again, whenever you read a topic, I suggest take some time, brainstorm, and generate the questions by yourself. Okay. Or the next type of questions are called as hypothetical questions. Hypothetical questions is something which has never happened. Now, none of the history textbooks talks about hypothetical questions because history is based on facts and figures. So history is like a science. It only talks about those events which have happened, not those events which could have happened. Okay. So just to give an example, everyone knows that the Gandhi played a very important role in our freedom struggle. But the question which is being asked is how that freedom struggle would have been different without Gandhi. Now, what would be this is the other way of asking what is Gandhi's impact on our freedom struggle, or what is the role played by Gandhi in freedom struggle. But this is something different way of asking. Again, as I told, this is non-conventional question. No history textbook talks about hypothetical things because they might at the max, right? Perhaps if Gandhi not there, the freedom struggle would have been like this. But no historian would do a PhD on a hypothetical event. So that is why no historian would talk on hypothetical events. Again, as I told, these are non-conventional questions. You have to generate the points then and there during the examination. Okay. Or how the Italian reunification would have been different without Count Cavour. How Italian unification would have been, or how German unification would have been different without Bismarck, or how American Revolution would have been different without the intellectuals. Again, all these are hypothetical type of questions. What would have happened if industrial revolution has not taken place? What would have happened if Renaissance has not taken place? What could have happened in freedom struggle if Bengal Renaissance has not taken place? Again, these are all hypothetical questions which I am generating. So try to think on the question why before entering into the what exactly was the issue. Why it happened like that. Again, this is or what could have been different if it did not have. Again, as a student of general studies, so this is something which is expected out of you that you are generating the points then and there in the examination. Okay. And the fourth type of questions which are being asked in the exam, which I call it as context based questions. Okay, context based, again, this is something which is generally asked in your history optional paper, but if it is asked in history optional, there is a very good likelihood it can be asked in your GS paper as well. So my idea is to give is to accustom yourself with the demands of UPSC. Like there was a question, enlightened despots are not politically liberal. Now, who are enlightened despots? Why they are not politically liberal? First of all, knowing that itself is a big deal for students. Or Europe lost a mistress, gained a master. Friends in war did not remain friends in peace. Now, this is about the World War One and World War Two, where countries like Germany and Italy, they were on the same side when the war was starting, but during the World War One. But by the time the World War One has ended, both are on the opposite side. Or we can see that during World War Two, uh, US and Soviet Union fought on the same side, but just after the war, they became the bitter enemies. And we can also see that Japan and America fought the war on the same side in World War One, whereas in World War Two they became bitter enemies. Okay, and Britain and France are arch rivals, but during World War One and World War Two they fought together. Now this is the irony of history. Okay, where friends in war did not remain friends in peace. Now this is something which you need to understand the context before answering this type of questions. Or the next question is Indira stands convicted. Now this is something about the Dr. Mortimer statement of how the decline of Indus Valley civilization started. Okay, so try to get some idea why Indira stands convicted is a famous statement about the decline of Indus Valley civilization and how Aryan invasion theory is linked to that and what are the challenges to the theory, what are the evidences to support that theory. Okay. Or the Buddha smile. Again, this is something about the Operation Smiling Buddha, Pokhran 1, 1974, Indira Gandhi. Okay, nothing to do with Bodhisattva or Buddha. Okay, so these are some type of contextual based questions. Until you understand the context, it becomes nearly impossible for anyone to answer the questions. Again, this is just my classification, okay, of all the non-conventional questions, because majority of the questions which are being asked in UPSC are non-conventional questions, which does not require academic study. Even with academic study, you might not be able to answer these questions. So this is where your approach to history for UPSC has to be completely different from that of academic history. Because many students think when they say history, they start reading 6th class NCERT, 7th class NCERT, and they end up not writing well in the exam. I'm not saying they are not good. I'm saying that they are not enough for your exam. There is something much more needs to be done for this exam. Okay. So we'll discuss the strategy much more in the next lecture. Thank you all. Hope you find it interesting. Thank you. Bye.